Hello, everybody in 7A. This is your professor, Ian Jones. This is just an update for week 2 of the course. I just want to touch on some of the things that we did last week, just to touch base with that first week of work, how everything's going, give you some kind of like group feedback. I'm giving you some individual feedback on some of the stuff. So I'm just going to talk about what we did last week. First of all, let me just say I'm really impressed with the work everybody's done. It's been great. I'm always nervous when I'm teaching one of these summer courses or a fast track course because you need people to buy in right away and start doing the work and hit the ground running really efficiently. And everybody's been doing that, so that's great. The conversations everybody had with the story, the conversations or the way everybody's discussing the syllabus, the effort people put into the journals, it's really been very impressive. So that's great. So let me just run through everything one at a time. Okay, so the syllabus. You discussed the syllabus using perusal. There were some great questions and comments. I answered some of them in the perusal program itself. Some other people have been emailing me directly about with some pressing questions. I know that some of the answers will be you'll get some of your answers as we go through the course. You're asking about instructions for or details about stories and things like that. So that will become clear as we move through the course and you get the instructions. I would just remind you, if you have any questions, of course, email me or come to my office hours. I'm here, every day if you want to talk to me, if you're confused. So that was the syllabus. Let's see, the readings. I just wanted to mention the readings. I had a video lecture and then 2 articles from that online textbook. So those are the readings you're expected to do every week. That's kind of like your textbook assignment that you would do for a face-to-face class, and then be expected to have read that before class. Some of those, when it's in the reading sections, it's usually not perusal based or anything like that. So there's no assignment attached to it. So you're expected to do that on your own. It's really gonna help you with the discussions, right? So, this week when we're discussing setting, there are articles about information in the reading about setting specifically. So you're gonna, if you read through the things in the reading, it's gonna help you with everything else. So that's the readings. So that's the second thing I want to talk about. Journals. So the first journal was the notebook, keeping a notebook. And that's the only time you're going to turn that in this semester, but I hope you do keep up a writer's notebook throughout the semester. And people approach it in totally different ways, which is always awesome. Some people approach it more like a journal, where they're recording their emotions and kind of reflecting on something that happened that day. And other people just jotted down the basic stuff. So you got to find your own way to use a document like that, because really a notebook is just there to help you as a writer generate ideas and details about the world, right? Because a good writer is a good observer, someone who's observing details about the world and includes those in their story, right? That's how you create realistic, or at least not even realistic. Sometimes you don't want realism, but realistic or interesting and engaging, insightful characters and situations and such. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I've definitely had that experience where I'm reading through something and a detail just doesn't seem real to me. I'm like, oh, that's not likely. That doesn't seem like it would be in the real world. And it loses, suddenly the whole story loses, I don't know, impact for me. It loses any kind of engagement that I had with it. So, a good writer, you really want to observe and take those notes. And, we see weird things every day that you'd want to include in your own writing, perhaps in the future. So that's what that purpose is. That's the only time you'll turn in this semester, but hopefully you'll decide to continue that practice of recording observations as a writer. The second journal was that narrative, where I give you the 5 pictures. And I like doing that one because it's people approach that in different ways too. But the interesting thing is people almost always follow that Freytag's pyramid, that narrative arc I was talking about, without me even telling you to do that. I just said, tell me a story. And people automatically go into that. They introduce characters and setting and conflict. And then there's rising action. Things are happening. There's a plot, there's a climax, and then there's some kind of resolution. People automatically do that. And most of you did that. I don't know if maybe you wrote that before you watched my video lecture about Freytag's pyramid, but I'm sure you would have written almost the same thing even if you didn't watch that lecture. We're just so trained to think of narrative in that way, and maybe that's how the human mind works. Maybe that's just how narrative works inherently is, we have the kind of exposition, rising action, climax kind of structure. Maybe that's just the way the human mind works, right? That cause and effect thing. But it's always fun to read those stories, and they were a lot of fun to read too. There was, all kinds of different takes on it. Some were very introspective, and some were very silly, and some were dark, and you get this whole range. But they all conform to this kind of basic structure where everybody's introducing their characters and the conflict and et cetera, like I was just talking about. So that was fun. The flip grid worked well. Everybody got a chance to participate. I had some people emailing me with technical issues, but we got through it. There were some great recommendations for short stories and Netflix series that I'll definitely be taking you up on and watching and reading. I was also thrilled to see a conversation about one of my favorite short stories, Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, take place. I can't remember. Oh, I think it was. No, I can't remember who. Was it Andrea who posted about that? I can't remember who posted about that one originally, but then there were like 4 or 5 people who responded and read the story as a result, and that was a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite short stories. I thought about putting it on the syllabus, but I always use it for English 1B, so I didn't want to overlap in those ways. But oh man, it's such a good short story. And kudos to Tanya for wearing her mask. That was a fun video. You got to stay safe out there. I just want to talk about 2 other things. I know this video is starting to get long. Story number 1 instructions are posted. I want you to go, you should go through those and start thinking about them. They are deliberately vague. There's no real prompt, like tell me, like with instructions and a breakdown of what you should do. And that's deliberate, right? This is a creative writing course. I've given you I just want you to try to use some of the things we've been talking about, setting, character, structure, right? Use those. And how you do that is up to you. If you want to write a more genre-based story, like a science fiction or a Western or a romance or something like that, totally fine. You can do whatever you want with this, the instructions, right? Just as long as you're practicing some of those basic elements that we've been talking about. That's kind of the purpose of the first story. If you're stuck with ideas, you can come talk to me, and we can hash out some ideas. But otherwise, have some fun with it, right? It's meant to be fun. It's a creative writing course, so hopefully you have fun with it. And finally, the discussion of the story of an hour. It was great. Everybody did a fantastic job. I like how specific everybody was. That's the key to dissecting stories, right? Being specific. And for this course, we're trying to think about ourselves. Think about stories from the perspective of a writer, how the craft is done, right? Like, how does the author create impressions on the reader, and how could we use that for our own writing, right? We have that great. It's one of my favorite stories because it's so condensed, right? It's so dense and it's so it's only 2 pages, but there's so much going on. Just the movement of Miss Mallory, right? She's downstairs, she gets the news, she goes upstairs to her like kind of private place and looks out to the world. She sees like this kind of like spring rebirth scene. She's reborn when she realizes, hey, I'm free now. And then she goes back downstairs, as the line is the goddess of victory. She's ascending back down to earth from her kind of heavenly abode, and then she gets the second piece of news, and that causes her to die when she's brought back down to the world, and then she dies like that. So just the movement of the character and the setting is fantastic. There were a lot of great comments. I really liked one of the last ones. Amanda wrote, I was not expecting that. That's the second time my expectations were subverted. And that's when she dies at the end. Because that's what the story is great, because it's about subverting expectations. When she gets the news that her husband dies, you do not expect her to go upstairs and then have this revelation that she's free and that she's, finally happy in her life, right? That's not how we think about this kind of mourning scene, right? So, we get that. But then when she dies at the end, you're like, wow, that's why did she die at the end? And there was a lot of discussion in the perusal about that. And I think when I'm reading it, you have to read that last line very carefully, because it says something like the doctors said that she died of a happiness that kills, right? Because she was so happy to see her husband back. But note that it's the doctors who say that, right? The doctors say that she was so happy that her husband was back, she was shocked and she died. But we, the reader, we know that she was shocked that her husband is alive, but she's not happy. She's realizing, oh man, all these dreams I had, this spring rebirth scene that I saw at the window, it's gone, right? Suddenly I'm tied back to this man that I, maybe I like, but I definitely won't be able to do all the things that I was dreaming of. All her dreams are quashed, right? In this very real way. And just last note that I'll make: there's no evidence in the story that Mr. Mallory is a bad husband or abusive or anything like that. He's just, I think, what you're supposed to get out of it is just a conventional marriage, right? I mean, it's set, over like 120, 130 years ago, so gender roles were even more tight than they are now. But so, I mean, I should use the word so. So we need to think about it in that sense, that she's trapped in this kind of very conventional marriage. It's not that he um, is bad to her in any kind of overt way. It's just that she doesn't get to do the things she wants because she's a married woman, right? And this might seem like a world away, 130 years ago, but think about it in your own life, right? Like I know I don't get to do everything I want. I have 2 kids and a wife. I talk about it all the time, and a mortgage and all this kind of stuff. So I can't just like hit the road and go for a 3-hour road trip. I can't go to Coachella every year, right? These things just aren't things I can do. So if I suddenly had this moment where everything I wanted to do was open to me, and it didn't involve my family. Don't get me wrong, I love my family, but this other vista was open to me, and my heart went there, and then suddenly it was taken away. You know, it would be depressing. And there are things that we all give up to have the things we want. So this is just a kind of different version of that. But even though it seems like a world away, there's still, think about it in your own experience as well. Try to reflect on it, how um, it expresses some kind of central human, I don't know, situation. Not to mention that it's a reflection of gender roles as we know them in our society, right? We still have um, tighter constrictions on women than men in marriages, especially, right? Anyways, that's about it for now. I'm running really long. I didn't mean to speak for 12 minutes, but I was impressed with everything that's going on, so I wanted to chime in. Okay, thank you, and have a good remainder of the week. It is Tuesday, so you got lots of time. Okay, bye bye.